When you sit down to enjoy a meal or to indulge in the seductive sweetness of your favorite fruit, how often do you pause to think about where the contents of your plate come from? Every day, millions of farmers around the world work tirelessly to ensure that we remain fed. But despite their role being pivotal to our literal existence, it often seems like the efforts of these superheroes goes unnoticed. Regardless, to men like Daniel Arthurton, agriculture remains a way of life. His unwavering connection to the earth stems not from a desire for public approval. He is instead rooted in his deep connection to family tradition and a firm desire to excel at what he does.
Farming, there are different dimensions to me where I am. I'm a product of my ancestry. I'm a product of my observation, following the lead of my grandparents, my parents, and also a motivation to take agriculture to a higher level. So I am the great grandson of Nick Amory, who was the father of Hilly Amory, who was the person who introduced the Amory Poly into NTV'S. So when I speak, at least that's part of on my mother's side. And on my mother's side also, my grandmother, she used to be an estate worker at the New River Estate because I grew up in Webbsground in Gingerland, Nevis. Getting up early in the morning and seeing my grandmother leave, at 5, 6, and then I, very early in my life, having to tend animals, sheep, cattle, and that sort of things. It kind of triggered in me a desire to want to do this thing and do it well. On the other side, my father was the waterman who established the water infrastructure in Nevis. And so he was once responsible for the catchment, 14 acres at Camp Spring. And so he had hundreds of different species of fruit trees. We sold breadfruit by the bags, breadnut by the oil tins, avocado by the tins, mangoes. We used to sell mangoes, bananas. We sell bananas by the truckload. But that was sort of the basis of me seeing agriculture and what it did for enabling my father to support his children and, all of us, and my grandmother to earn a livelihood and earn her own home. That told me that, probably there's something in this that I should follow.
Daniel's proclivity for excellence eventually led him to the University of Massachusetts in 1989, where he obtained his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture Economics. During his 50-plus years in the field of agriculture, Daniel has profited the industry in a number of different ways, from serving as an extension officer in the local Ministry of Agriculture to becoming a consultant to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Despite his notable professional accomplishments, he insists that the farm remains his favorite place to be and strongly believes that if any young person is to be successful in the field of agriculture, they must first possess a genuine love for the industry and be motivated to excel.
This is something that you must have a purpose, a passion for. When I speak, you can see I actually love what I do. This is my zone. I'm happiest in this place. I'm not happy when I had, to be wearing my suits and, have big officials and keep big meetings and things like that. I like the interaction and sharing the content that I came for, but I always had that long-term vision that, I'll get to that place where I'll get over here, in a space where I have a lot of control over the outcomes. And this is what, I think is important. So the limit, there's no limit, as I find, but it cannot be anything that you are encouraged to do alone. It got to be something that, you see you are motivated because you have a desire to do something, whether for health, or for your wealth, you know, and riches. You understand? So in that kind of way, that's where I think the motivation will have to come from. Because I mean, it's like I tell you, it's for the long haul. It's not for short term.
As the owner of the NTV'S Hydro Gardens, Daniel closely recalls the COVID-19 pandemic and how it limited our island's access to food. With the ever-growing scale and diversity of his local produce, he hopes to help the island step away from the mass importation of food products and move towards a level of food security reminiscent to the days of his grandparents.
When we had COVID, you had a situation where you had money, people had their aircrafts, but they couldn't move from where they were. Even us in NTV'S and so forth. I remember I had this whole place. That's one of the reasons why I changed my business model from having a lot of vegetables to planting orchards and interspersing them with small, you know, concentrated plots of vegetables. Because I realized that what was happening is that I had all these vegetables and there wasn't a system in place to take them all, put them in a central location and then distribute them to persons. There is a tendency for our people to, yes, use technology and use the latest. And so we have the backhoe and the excavator. Very, very hard at work. You can hear one in the background. And what those do is just remove a lot of the guinea trees, the avocado, the old mango, the old species that were resistant to a lot of diseases. We're not talking about imported varieties that have just been brought and are now being acclimatized and sold locally. We're talking about, you know, long time-tested varieties that whether hurricanes or earthquakes, they didn't affect those. They continue to bear. And so what I have sought to do was to save that biodiversity. So I've tried to get things like tamarind, I've tried to get things like tangerine, shaddock, you know, hard to get stuff, mansiport, bay leaf, avocado, you know, breadnut, breadfruit, all these kinds of things, and plant them on this space so that, you know, in the fullness of time, persons can have, you know, what they hear their parents and their grandparents speak about, still here, that it has not totally been lost. So the other critical important thing is that when there was COVID or anytime 2 days after a serious storm, this little country get cut off, even from the ferries transfer going from NTV'S to St. Kitts. When that happens, if that there has to be a world war, God forbid, or something that is more global in scale, similar to the pandemic, you have to be able to sustain yourself within your borders for an extended period of time. And it's my thinking that, you know, the people who are going to be able to save that day are the farmers.